So, there's been a new theory circulating around that we may be getting a double album for Clancy, entitled Clancy Ultimate Chapter, and that the number 25, which is found in the digital remains version of Clancy, is evidence that there will be a total of 25 songs. And as I was looking through the digital remains, I certainly did see some evidence of a potential second half to Clancy, along with some other points of interest, which I will likely explore in another video. So I don't think a double album is at all impossible, especially since they mentioned having another album almost finished when they released Scaled and Icy, but I do think we shouldn't get our hopes up. However, the reason that I'm not spending the rest of this video exploring that theory is because I stumbled upon something which I think is much more significant, and which we've spent far too much time just ignoring. As I was exploring the number 25 some more, and contemplating what we know about the lore so far, I decided to do some research into the Bourbaki group, to see if 25 was an important number for them. While I was doing this, something significant suddenly stood out to me, which I haven't seen anyone else really discussing before. Now, this may be an easily refutable theory, and if so, please do refute it. But if true, it would provide a pretty major twist to the story of Trench and DEMA, but one which makes sense. When this realization dawned upon me, and I'll explain in a moment what exactly it was, it reconciled two points of the lore which had never made sense to me. Firstly, it appears that Tyler Joseph does not exist as himself in the DEMA universe, but Josh Dun does. His name is repeatedly mentioned in lore-heavy songs, such as Morph or Overcompensate, and it's also in The Judge, which most people argue is lore-related. His name was also mentioned in the live versions of No Chances. So Josh Dun is very clearly a character in this fictional story. So that's cool, but I was always confused why he existed, and Tyler Joseph didn't. He only existed as the character Clancy. Why doesn't Tyler Joseph exist as himself? Well, maybe he does. And for the sake of argument, let's assume that Tyler Joseph does exist in the DEMA universe as himself. What would this entail? Firstly, Clancy isn't real. This is quite literally Tyler Joseph in a mask, using a name which he saw on a neon gravestone. We can pretty explicitly see in this new artwork that Clancy is the name on the neon gravestones. The patterns line up too perfectly. So yes, I was wrong about that in my earlier video by claiming that it was Nicholas Bourbaki's name on the grave, not Clancy's. Well, half wrong. Secondly, Blurryface isn't real. And no, I don't just mean he's not a real person because he's a fictional character which Tyler created to give a name to his insecurities. We all know he's not actually a real person. What I mean is this. Inside the fictional world of Trench and DEMA, assuming this world exists, this character of Blurryface or Nicholas Bourbaki does not exist. He is, instead, a figment of Tyler's imagination, placed there and spurred on by the real enemy. In multiple interviews during the Blurryface era, Tyler was pretty explicit about the fact that the pitched down vocals on the album were Blurryface's voice, and the rest of the vocals were Tyler's voice. But when Blurryface names himself, when we hear the line, "My name's Blurryface," in Stressed Out, this is sung in Tyler's voice, not in the pitched down one. And we do hear that pitched down voice later on in the same song, but never for that specific line. Now, that's interesting, right? The pitched down voice, which supposedly belongs to Blurryface, never identifies itself as such, even when it easily could have. Now, you could just say, well, it's just Tyler identifying with his alter ego Blurryface in that moment. To which I would respond, exactly. So let's look at this pitched down voice for a moment. When did we first hear it? And when did we last hear it? Well, we were introduced to this voice on the first single which 21pilots released in preparation for Blurryface, Fairly Local. And in the second half of that song, the voice sings, "The few, the proud, and the emotional." We last heard this voice at the end of Paladin Strait, saying, "So few, so proud, so emotional." Paladin Strait is not the end of the story, but it did give us this major clue which I think we're all ignoring. Because on first glance, this clue seems significant and powerful, but not necessarily like a clue. But it's important for one thing, because this is the first time this phrase has shown up in the explicit DEMA lore. The FPE initials have appeared time and again. Its failed perimeter escape, future performance event, food, petrol, etc., but not as few, proud, emotional. Now it has. But that in and of itself is not much to go on. If we look at the 9 bishops of DEMA, we can see that they each derive their names from the lyrics of a song on Blurryface. And if we look at Fairly Local, we can see that the bishop named Andre derives his name from that song, in the lyric, "And repeat yesterday's dance." So what do we know about Andre? Well, it turns out we actually know quite a bit, given that he is the only bishop to be named after a member of the Nicolas Bourbaki group, a group of French mathematicians formed in the 1930s. In fact, André Weil was a rather key member of the group, given that he was the one who founded it. He also came up with the empty set symbol, which appears frequently throughout 21Pilots imagery and branding. Now, a moment ago, I mentioned that the 9 bishops of DEMA all derive their names from lyrics of songs on Blurryface. But that's not quite true, is it? There is one bishop whose name does not appear anywhere in the lyrics, and that is Nico, or Nicolas Bourbaki. He is commonly associated with the song Stressed Out, since his pseudonym Blurryface does appear in that song, but his real name never does. Furthermore, Nicolas Bourbaki was not a real person, but rather the pseudonym which André Weil created for the group which he founded. But that's not all. If we look at the 9 circles on the cover art of Blurryface, the circle which corresponds to the tower of André is the eye. And if we go back to the Scaled and Icy era, there was a control room which appeared in the weeks leading up to the livestream experience. This featured the 9 circles of DEMA, but this time in color. According to this coloring, André corresponds with the color blue, a color which we saw featured prominently throughout the Scaled and Icy era. In his letters, Clancy mentions that he was placed in a room which had a blue door when creating the music for Scaled and Icy and the livestream experience. But there's also something else which he mentions in his journal. Allow me to read. Thus began the sessions. Every day my cell door would open. I followed the guard down the familiar hall, through the blue door, to sit down at the desk and chair, my designated creative space, perfectly centered under their watchful eye. Sometimes 3, sometimes 8. Not once were all 9 present. He was never there. I would have felt it if he was. And the he to which he refers, as evidenced by other notes which he makes throughout the letters and journal, is referring to Blurryface. So this is interesting. Never once are all 9 bishops present. There are only 8, and Blurryface in particular is never there. Furthermore, in the music video for Nico and the Niners, we again only see 8 bishops. And in the music video for Heavy Dirty Soul, we see a robed figure sitting in the front seat, who just mysteriously vanishes. In the I Am Clancy video, Tyler explains that this was Nicolas Bourbaki, and the fact that he so easily disappeared further supports the idea that Blurryface isn't real. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, the only reason I went down the rabbit hole of this theory was because I was trying to find a correlation between the number 25 and the already existing lore. And one thing that I did notice is that if you take the names Blurryface and Nicolas Bourbaki and add them together, you get 25 letters. Now, this may just be coincidence, but then again, this is 21Pilots, and it's becoming harder and harder to believe in coincidences. But there's something else. As some of you may have noticed, I've actually been mispronouncing Andre's last name this entire time. It's not pronounced Weil. It's actually supposed to be pronounced Weil. You know, like the port of Weil. Or Vialism. So you tell me, is Nicolas Bourbaki the founder and leader of Vialism? Or is it actually André Weil? Okay, so let's suppose that's true. What does it mean for the story? How does this all fit in? Well, here's my theory. André Weil is the founder of Vialism and the leader of the 8 bishops of DEMA. He is the true antagonist to the story. So then, if Blurryface isn't real, where did he come from? And why does Tyler consider him to be the 9th bishop of DEMA? This is where Regional at Best once again proves itself to be very important. In the final song in that album, Clear, Tyler writes the following. I wish that I had 2 faces, to prove which theory worked, yelling on the street corner, or cleverly masking your words. He has 2 faces. Clancy, which is the face of clarity, and Blurryface, which is, well, blurry and masked. But neither are wholly him. Each is just a part of who he is. And this may be why the symbolism of the number 2 keeps reappearing throughout the videos recently, where they hold up their fingers to show the number 2. Yes, it may be referring to a double album, but it could be more than just a veiled marketing stunt. The album Blurryface begins with Tyler identifying with that character. My name's Blurryface. But by the end of it, he realizes that he should no longer identify with that side of him. I've got two faces, Blurry's the one I'm not. I need your help to take him out. In other words, Tyler acknowledges that Blurryface is the side of him which he should distance himself from, because it's full of darkness and negativity. Instead, he begins to associate and identify with his other face, Clancy. In the next album, Trench, this distancing becomes a disassociation, as Tyler gives this face, Blurryface, a name and identity very removed from himself, imagining him to be a separate character, Nicholas Bourbaki. We actually see this alluded to in the song Morph, with the line, "He goes by Nico." Using the phrase "he goes by" implies that that's not actually his real name. It's just a name he's using, a pseudonym. And this character also sometimes calls himself Blurryface, according to the I Am Clancy video. But he's not either. He's just a part of Tyler. As Trench and then Scaled and Icy progress, Tyler is allowed to further indulge in and strengthen this fantasy of Nicholas Bourbaki, spurred on by Andre, who, as we saw, is controlling his creativity and his freedom of thought. Ultimately, Tyler is successfully convinced into thinking that there are 9 bishops, not 8, and that the leader of them is not Andre, but Blurryface, a projection and disassociation of Tyler's mind, put there by Andre, who is the real enemy, tricking Tyler into destroying himself. But inside every lie, there is a grain of truth. It is true that Blurryface is a side of Tyler which should be eliminated and distanced from. It is a side of darkness and negativity. But that is not the ultimate enemy. Destroying Blurryface will not save DEMA from Vialism, or overthrow the bishops. And if Tyler gives his life to take out Nico, the leader of the bad guys will still remain. Andre Weil. Thank you so much for following along with this idea all the way to the end. Definitely let me know what you think of it in the comments. As I mentioned earlier, if you think this theory is easily refuted, please do refute it. That's not a challenge. It's just a request. If you enjoyed this or found it interesting at all, please do subscribe for more commentary and reviews.